Welcome to Sincerely Japan, the drifting podcast.
All right, episode 2. I've got a special guest for you guys today, Nate Shuchuk. He's a very involved member with Villain's drift team. It's turned parts company, and now operators of Villain Sportsland, a track up in Washington. So thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me.
So I guess let's jump right into it, man. So Villains is one of what I would consider one of the founding American drift teams in the same sense as they are in Japan, right? With the crazy liveries and making sure all the cars look pretty uniform. And there's obviously a few other teams that have popped up kind of since then as well. It's obviously gained in popularity. What was kind of the inspiration for you all to start that?
Well, the first thing is let's take a step back and with the founding thing. Before we have only been what I would call a team since like maybe 2012 or 2011. There have been people doing the team thing in the U.S. since back in 2008 or so, even earlier. One of the big influencers from back then was a team by the name of Drift Union. There was 3 purple cars from Canada, good old boys who were doing the team thing way back then. And I remember, I think one of the very first times I was ever actually saw team drifting instead of just like normal drifting was a YouTube or Facebook edit, I think, that was floating around of them driving a facility called PGP. Back in, this had to be like 2010, 2011, I think, and they had all matching cars, and that was just the coolest thing to see because, like, if you're into cars, a lot of people like me, for example, who got into cars, you got into drifting because it was neat and cool, but you didn't know everything about it. And I think, like I said, my very first introduction to team stuff was definitely. I would have to point to Drift Union. I think would be the first people to ever make me aware that you could do drifting without like doing that 1v1 thing.
Yeah,
I guess would be the best way to kind of describe how that all got started.
That's wild. But I mean, in terms of the crazy livery and the big body kits, where did that all come from?
So that's just a byproduct of time. So like back in the early days, when you first get started. For me, it was like 2009 or something when I got my first drift car. You would see a picture of a cool car online or something, and you go, I want to have that someday, but you never really put any serious thought into actually having something like that. But as time progressed, the car, you stop needing to work on the engine because you got the engine pretty squared away. It runs at every event you go to. And so you kind of work to the next thing. Well, what was the next thing for me? I think it was a roll cage, and I got a roll cage in my car, and I was like, you go a whole season, no problems. You go, all right, well, I want to do something else. What else can I do? My engine runs great, and everything else works. Maybe I'll put a body kit on my car because I think it looks cool. I mean, at the end of the day, there was never like, oh, this will be really neat. It's just you just saw what other people did, and you were like, I think that's how we all started with drifting. Was we saw someone else do something, and however you saw it, whether you saw it in an option video or you saw it on, YouTube videos or real player videos or however long back ago you were influenced by what other people were doing, you'd see this video come online and you go, wow, that's so cool. Cause I'm from a very, very small town. The very first drift car I ever saw in person was my own because it wasn't something you would come across, and so for myself, anyways, and this is true of Jason, my most direct teammate. He drives the RX-7 for the team. We never saw anything but what we saw online, just because we were from a very small town, and so it was just an effort to emulate what we thought looked cool. You saw someone else do it, and you go, "Wow, that's badass! I want to do that." And so, first came body kits. And then after body kits, the cars being 13 different colors. I mean, you know the stage I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
We were all there. I mean, I think I spent a whole year in that stage. The next year, I went through and fixed all the fiberglass as best I could. And I was like, well, I didn't like it looking multiple colors. I want it to be one color. And so I had always had the hots for copper Loctite. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
No clue. No.
Or not Loctite, sorry, anti-seize. The silvery stuff you put on.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, there's two flavors. There's the silver and there's this like copper colored anti-seize.
Yeah.
And I remember it must have been like, maybe it was like 2008 or something when I first turned to Jason, because we were friends before we found drifting, and I was like, dude, wouldn't this be the coolest color to paint a car? And he looks at me and goes, no, that is brown. That is a terrible color. I am not painting my car that color ever. And I wasn't be swayed. I thought it was an amazing color. So when it finally came down to it, I had the money to pay for the paint, and he didn't. So guess who made the call on what color the cars were going to be? And yeah, so that was kind of how the cars got painted one color, and I think that was the point where people started to. Nobody knew that him and I were a team because we went together, we drove together. Like neither of us have ever been to an event without the other one, just because we were from a tiny town.
Yeah. And
the nearest track is like 4 or 5 hours away, so we were traveling from day one. From the very first day, we had to get a trailer and get to an event. So we kind of developed codependently, and when it came to paint, we put paint on the cars, and I think that was the same year we also got shiny wheels. I had come across a set of worked VSKFs on Kruber for like $500. They're super cheap.
Jeez. Yeah.
And had to have those because I just spent the last 3 years just drooling over ones you'd seen on the internet, and I'd never even seen a set before, and so like not in person anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to get that, and I think he got a set of worked DHs for like $300 on Craigslist. They were on like a Ford Lincoln or something. I don't know. We just found it. Like I was like, oh, cool Japanese wheels, and he was like, I don't give a shit, man. Does it work? And I'm like, yeah, you got to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of drug him along because he was always about the driving and about making sure the cars worked good, and I was always about like, oh, they got to look cool because so I was like, we're kind of different cut of vein,
yeah,
so to speak. And so we spent a year driving with the cars painted and looking presentable. And in that phase, Scott, our third, proceeded to approach us and go, hey, I want to join the team. And Jason and I flatly told him to fuck off. We'd had a really bad experience with him at a previous event a couple of years beforehand. He'd gotten very drunk and had made a real jerk of himself, and so we pretty much told him we didn't like him. And which is really funny because the guy kept coming back. We went to, I think, 12 events that year, and he came to every single event. And we have this thing, we never go to the same place twice in a year.
Mm-hmm.
We go to all the different tracks within like a 12-hour drive of where we live. Once, because all tracks usually do like a big 2-day.
Yeah.
Most of the events are 1 day, but then they'll all do like a 1-2-day event. And we looked and they were all spread out, and we're like, what's the difference between going 4 hours and going 6? It's an extra little bit of time off and some more money in the tank. So
mm-hmm.
we're traveling anyways. So we might as well just go see what's all there. So we went to all these places, and he just kept showing up. He was there at every stop, going, hey, I want to be on the team. And we were just like, no, go away. And he kept showing up. And so, we got to the end of the year, and, Jason says, like, dude, this guy is about it. Like, he wants to be here. He wants to be doing this. Like, there's lots of people who want to come hang out with us, but he's the only person who's there at every event in the pits, working on the cars. He's got the sauce. And so that winter, we decided to formally induct him into the team. He had the FD that he was working on, and that spring we debuted that car online, and I think that was the very first time we started seeing like a lot of like positive attention on social media. And as I'm sure anyone can guess, that gets addicting really fast. You can catch your like. I hate to admit it, but like, dude, that bit me so fucking hard. It's not funny.
Mm-hmm.
And so like almost immediately it was like, oh God, this is amazing. And then we started, like I think we got approached by Factory 83, Ian Dillon, and he was just like, dude, you guys' cars are amazing. I want to do something to them. And I was like, at the time I was like, well, this is a lot to take in, but I was excited. I wanted to be involved, and so everyone else on the team was like, yeah, we've always seen cars with cool stickers and stuff, and this kind of fell in our lap. Like we should jump on it. We should go for it.
Yeah.
And I remember he sent us in the group chat. He sent us the first picture of the cars, and the guys were like, "Yeah, that's cool." And I was like, "That is the ugliest thing in the world. I hate it." Because I pretty much told him, I want something that looks like a Gucci handbag. I was like, I want something that looks like, one of those, finessed up Valley girls would be, pearls and chains, and gold. Like, that's what I wanted,
Yeah.
And he came up with I think the very first livery that most people remember us for.
Mm-hmm.
And I hated it. I hated it with a passion. But everyone else liked it, and so
you picked the color, right? So they get to pick the livery.
Yeah, I guess so. They picked it out, and it turned out to be really popular. That was the year I think, dude, we went so many places that year. I think we went maybe 20 different tracks that year. I mean, I have no idea how we afforded it. Looking back at it now, lots of credit card debt, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
That was kind of how that kind of got out of hand. And then, it was something where, we kind of, I wouldn't say became synonymous, but along with other people like Tandem of Dye, mm-hmm. and Animal Style and Proceed and Risky Devils, it kind of took on a little bit of a life of its own.
Yeah.
And I'm fairly certain for a short period of time I was completely enslaved to the idea that, the internet meant something special, and that, if people knew what you were doing, all of a sudden, it was somehow more valuable or something. I don't know. That was getting over that took time. I think it took me 2 years to kind of grow out of that and learn that there's more to life than getting high fives and internet points for doing shiny shit.
Yeah. I mean, it's wild. I can't imagine being in that position, because for me, I remember when Villains came out, and see, we never met each other. I lived in Michigan and the East Coast forever, so the fact that I knew who you guys were, and now being overseas too, and that Villains has just grown and it's just gotten huge. So yeah, I can't imagine being in your seat.
Which is ridiculous to think about, because at the end of the day, like, the problem that I've now, since as an adult, have learned is that at the end of the day, you gain this ability to, communicate with a large number of people, and that's potentially dangerous, because honestly, like, between you, me, and the Christmas tree, like, what right do any of us have to communicate to such a large number of people? Because, who says we're on the morally correct track? Who says that what we're doing is good for drifting? I mean, for all I know, what we're doing is causing more harm than good. I mean, time will tell. We won't know, and for time, but maybe this whole thing that we are so excited about was really unhealthy for drifting in the long run. Maybe it's a good thing. Like I said, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, it's really scary to be in a position where people all over the world know who you are, know what you're doing, and go, oh, that's kind of cool. I want to do stuff like that. And it's like, it's good to be a positive example, but it's at the same time, it's kind of scary, because I think a lot of people don't think about the actual implications of their actions. A kid here in this.
I think you guys have the right idea, though, because
I would hope so.
Yeah,
but,
I say that
you don't actually know.
The parts shop is cool because you guys obviously offer parts that you would normally need for drifting at a heavily discounted rate to competitors, right? So
and the byproduct, that's complicated, because that existed long before the team. That existed before. Oh yeah, we need to back up, back to 2008 or something. When I first got started, in a little town, like I was saying earlier, there was no one I could actually see in face, person to person, who could educate me. There was no one to say, well, this is how you're supposed to drive. I'd probably spend a year learning what understeer was, to put that into perspective.
Yeah. It
was pretty bad. And so anytime I wanted something, the only two ways to get it were to either buy it or build it myself. And, being a 17-year-old high school kid, I didn't have any money.